Don't get ahead of yourself. Wood's recollections of his great-granddaughter Anasta's life just wouldn't leave him alone, and he even chuckled a bit, recalling one particular instance. It was getting toward evening. Wood had washed his feet off in the stream and was getting ready to go to sleep when he suddenly heard a child crying, or not even crying, but sobbing. He turned around and saw Anasta running toward him. She looked unusual. Her face was all smeared with something black, and hay was sticking out of the opening of her dress. She ran up to Wood, limping a bit, sat down on the earthen mound outside, and, taking her head in her hands, began lamenting her sad state. "Oh, woe is me, Grandad. My life is just coming to an end." Now that Alan had proposed to her, the little girl wanted to grow up as soon as possible, and when she'd wake up in the morning, instead of running off to the stream pool to get washed, she'd take a straight pole, stand it up against the wall of the house, and score it to mark her height. And then, at the stream pool, before taking a dip in the water, she'd look at her reflection and wonder how long it would be before she'd get breasts like the ones grown-up women have. The kind of breasts they nurse little children with. "Have a drink of water, Anastasia, and calm down. Tell me what's happened." Anasta swallowed some water from the pitcher, and through her sobs began telling Wood the tale of her woe. "I knew it, Grandad, I knew it. They're all crazy about Alan because he's the handsomest and the smartest. I've been worried that in the time it takes me to grow up, one of the grown-up maidens will make my Alan fall in love with her. She'll make him love her. And today, when it was just getting towards evening, I saw them, these maidens, walking to the glade toward the mountain, and they were talking about my Alan, and I realized I can't wait any more. I can't wait till I grow up. I have to take action now. That's what I decided, and I started to take action. I took a little piece of coal and made up my eyes, the way grown-up maidens do it. Then I took a beet and painted my cheeks and my lips, and I even covered over my birthmark with clay, the birthmark that's right here on my forehead." Anasta pulled aside her bangs and showed Wood the birthmark on her forehead that resembled a tiny star. "Why in the world did you try to paint over the birthmark, Anastasia? After all, you can't see it." "Your beautiful hair covers it," asked Wood, concealing his smile. "Sure, it covers it, but the wind blows and it comes uncovered." "Let it come uncovered. I, for example, like your birthmark very much. It resembles a little star." "Ugh," Anasta said, wailing again. "You like it, Grandad, but I don't like it one bit. It's like I'm marked somehow. Mama doesn't have a little star on her forehead, and neither does Papa. And you don't have one either." Grandad would. "Who drew it on my forehead? Who was it who mutilated me? Ugh." "No one mutilated you, Anastasia. Quite the opposite. They adorned you. If you start doing kind deeds for people, they'll start saying that this act, say, was done by the little girl with the little star on her forehead. And if you do bad deeds, people might say that it was done by the little girl with the spot on her forehead. People see any person's appearance as beautiful if his deeds are beautiful." Wood stroked his great-granddaughter's head and then asked, "Anasta, tell me, why is there some hay peeking out of your dress?" "I made 2 little wads of hay and tied them to my chest with a ribbon so my chest would be the same as the grown-up maidens. And I put hay in my shoes under my heels too so I'd be a little taller. And then, all grown up, like a maiden, I went out to the glade where they get together with the young fellows. I got there and I saw Alan standing there along with the other young lads. And the maidens had gathered together a little ways away from them and were talking amongst themselves, sneaking glances at Alan, and Alan himself was glancing at the maidens. And once again, Anasta got all worked up and started crying again, and then went on, through her tears, "I saw him, Grandad. He was sneaking glances. I knew that before long they'd get into a circle and take each other's hands, and they'd do a circle dance and sing and look at each other. And so I'd be able to get into the circle too. I went up and stood next to the maidens. One of them was just staring at me. She looks and looks, and then she up and starts roaring with laughter, and all the rest of them too. When they see me, they start roaring with laughter. And all the guys standing with Alan, they were laughing too. Oh, woe is me, Grandad Wood. I was standing there all alone, and they were all laughing and laughing, looking at me and laughing. One guy fell right over onto the grass. He was rolling around and laughing. Wood looked down, trying to hide his smile, and asked, "Was Alan laughing at you too, Anastasia?" Alan wasn't laughing at me, Grandad Wood, not at all. Alan hit me. Wood was astonished. "He hit you? What do you mean he hit you?" "Just what I said, Grandad Wood. He hit me. First he walked up and picked me up the way you'd pick up a little child," she told him, blubbering. "And I so wanted to be a grown-up, but he picked me up like a little kid and took me behind the bushes. There he set me down on the path and said, 'Go along home, Anasta, wash up, and don't be such a dummy any more.' And I said I wouldn't go, and so I would be convincing. I stomped my foot a few times. Then he took me by the hand and spanked me. Like this and like that," Anasta said, slapping herself on the hip with her palm, all the while lamenting. "Now I'm all beaten up and unhappy and abandoned and unmarried." "What, did he take back his pendant from you?" Wood asked. "No, he didn't take it back." "Well, that means you're still married," Wood said, reasoning with her. "All the same, even if I'm married, I'm still beaten up and wretched." "Did it really hurt so much when Alan spanked you?" Wood asked. "I don't know, Grandad. I don't know. I didn't feel any pain, but the bitter insult was stronger than any pain." "Calm down, Anastasia. I can see that Alan spanked you out of love, so you wouldn't do things people would laugh at you for. That means he was shielding you from taunting in the future." "Out of love? Do people really spank you like that when they love you?" "Well, of course, that's not the best method, but perhaps at the moment Alan couldn't think of anything better. And you know, Anastasia," Wood went on, untying the bundles and taking the little wads of hay off her chest, "don't try so hard to be grown up. You'll grow up without making any effort at all. And at the moment you need to be thinking about other things, my dear little girl." "About what, Grandad? About what?" "You lie down on my lap, Anastasia, and I'll sing you your favorite song, the one with no words." Anasta laid her head on Wood's lap, blubbered another time or two, and at the very first notes of the familiar tune, drifted off to sleep. The next day, Anasta ran up to Wood, joyful and excited. Before she'd even stopped running, she announced to Wood, "He came by my little home. He came by. At first I wanted to hide when I saw him through the window, but then I just sat there, quiet as a mouse, so he'd think there wasn't anyone in the home." Alan walks up to the little home and takes a seat next to the entrance. He takes a seat, Grandad Wood, and he says, "I know you're home, Anasta. You're a very smart little girl, and a quick study, and I'll wait until you become a beautiful girl. Believe me, I'll wait. But don't you get ahead of yourself any more." And I sat there and didn't say a thing. And I wasn't at all mad at him any more. I felt like running out and hugging him and even kissing him like a grown-up on the cheek. But I didn't do that. I sat there, quiet as a mouse, so as not to get ahead of myself. Alan sat there a while longer near the entrance to my little home. Then he got up and left. And I ran to see you, Grandad Wood, to tell you about it. And you know what else, Grandad? You know, Alan, when he was sitting there at my place, he drew 3 little flowers on the wall of my little home. One bigger, one another a bit smaller, and a third tiny, tiny one. I saw them when I ran out. They're very pretty." Wood hugged Anasta and said, "Does that mean you're not wretched anymore and woe is no longer you?" "Now I'm joyful, and I feel like making something unusual and pretty, so everyone will look at it and be happy and say, 'Very pretty, good, great.' And so Alan will hear that and be proud of me." "That's a very correct decision that's come to you, Anastasia. Create beautiful creations in a burst of inspiration. Only in that way can we win the love of humans. We have to think. Putting an end to his reminiscing, Wood turned to his great-granddaughter, who had thought up a new game to play with the mammoth walking at the head of the caravan. He said, "Anasta, you're keeping the mammoth in a state of great tension with your playing. Is it really right to treat an inoffensive, kind animal that way?" "Actually, Granddad Wood, I'm keeping him in a state of pleasant tension. I'm distracting him from sad thoughts. And see, Granddad Wood, I distracted you from your gloomy thinking," Anasta said, jabbering away. "Yes, many people's thoughts are gloomy right now. That's a reason they've come up. But what about you, Anastasia? Can it be that you don't have any sad thoughts?" "I don't, Granddad Wood." "Does that mean that you don't understand why the adults of our family line are gloomy?" "I do understand, Granddad Wood. They're gloomy because the cold glacier is advancing. Many plants are dying from the cold. The people from various settlements have had to leave their family spaces, and no one knows where they'll have to go or how long they'll have to walk." "That's correct," Wood said pensively. And, somewhat astonished, he asked his great-granddaughter, "But what, aren't you sad to take leave of our family space, Anastasia?" "I'm not sad, Granddad Wood. As soon as that sad leave-taking thought came up, I immediately rejected it, and now I don't have it in me any more," Anasta said, jabbering away again light-heartedly and bobbing up and down on the mammoth's trunk. It was as if the mammoth walking alongside Wood understood he needed to carry the little girl alongside her great-grandfather and give them a chance to spend time with each other. Wood was both astonished and intrigued by his great-granddaughter's answer. What mysterious method she had managed to use to cope with the sad thoughts. And he asked, "Anastasia, can you tell me how you managed to reject the sad thoughts? What method you used?" "A very simple method, Granddad Wood. I decided to remain with my family space." "Remain? You decided to? But you didn't remain. After all, you're leaving it behind along with everyone, Anastasia." "For the moment, I happen to be leaving it behind. I'm accompanying everyone on their journey to a far-off land, but as soon as we come up onto that rise, the one you can see in the distance, it will be noon, and I'll need to be heading off back. I'll be back on my motherland by evening. The morning will dawn, and it will rejoice at seeing me. I'm already rejoicing right now myself. I can just imagine how much my motherland will rejoice at seeing me." Wood didn't respond to his great-granddaughter's words with alarm. He figured she had been joking or was just imagining going back in order to drive the sad thoughts off. Deciding to play along with the nimble-witted little girl, he said, "Yes, the entire space will rejoice at seeing you. But what will you do there all alone?" "First of all, I'll make up a hill of dirt and grass around my flower bed," Anasta replied, jabbering away. "And the little hill won't allow the cold glacier wind to blow on my beloved little flower. I need to be right alongside that little flower when it blossoms. If nobody's there next to it, the little flower will get very sad. What did it bloom for? It will think. What for if no one is going to rejoice at my beauty? But I'll be right there, and I will rejoice. The little flower will stop blooming, Anastasia, and there will be cold spells, the like of which we've never seen before. Many plants won't be able to bloom in the cold. A huge glacier is advancing upon our family space," Wood said, as if musing to himself as he ascended the rise Anasta had mentioned. "Yes, a glacier is advancing." "I'll stop the glacier, Granddad Wood," the little girl suddenly blurted out, jumping off the mammoth's trunk and enthusiastically jabbering on. I still don't know how, but I'll definitely stop it. Something there on my motherland will give me a hint about how to stop it. I feel it ever so strongly. Something will give me a hint, and I will be able to do it." There's a hint. There, on my motherland, it's there, but everyone has left. No one thought of the hint, and no one's there, and there's no one, and now there's no one the hint can hint to. Everyone thought about how to leave, where to go, to get away from the cold, but no one wanted to give it some thought, together with the hint, and think about how to push the glacier aside. And you yourself said it so often at our gatherings, Granddad Wood, that we have to think. Wood froze in his tracks. The caravan leader stood still too, and the others who had been following behind the mammoth had also stopped. The gray-haired head of the family line looked intently at his great-granddaughter, saying nothing. What Wood did a minute later, he was never able to explain that later, not to himself and certainly not to the others. He signaled to the people who were walking along the sides of the mammoth caravan to keep moving forward. But to Anasta he said, "The last one in the caravan is a mammoth that's limping, the son of the caravan leader. You know him, and he obeys you better than all the others. Take him with you, Anasta, and when it gets very cold you can follow in our tracks on him and catch up to us." "Thank you, Granddad Wood," the little girl cried joyfully. She grabbed him around the legs, snuggling up against him. "Thank you. How am I supposed to tell your mama and papa, your parents, what you're up to?" "I'll let them know by myself once I get back home. There's no need to say anything right now." "Goodbye, Granddad Wood." Anasta skipped along off to the last mammoth at the end of the caravan, and Wood followed his great-granddaughter's receding figure with his glance, as if what was happening hadn't quite sunk in yet. He continued on his path, and for some time there were no thoughts at all in his head. Only a few hours later did Wood ask himself, "Why did I give my consent? We have to think." No one thought about how to stop it. No one. She was the only one. Then he said out loud, "I did the right thing." Dun the mammoth. The huge mammoth Dun was walking at the end of the caravan, limping slightly. In his build and his strength he resembled his father, the leader of the mammoths. When he was still just a young little mammoth, a boulder fell from the mountain and fractured his leg. The people tied sticks to the animal's leg with ropes so the bone would knit properly. Dun had to spend many days lying on his own. It was at that point that a touching friendship started up between the mammoth, 3-year-old Anasta, and the kitten the little girl would bring along with her. Little Anasta would often visit the mammoth as he lay there with the bandaged leg and bring him treats and talk to him tenderly. She taught the kitten to chase annoying bugs and flies away from the mammoths lying on the grass, and she'd place the kitten on his hip. But the main thing she did was talk to the two of them and instruct them, the way grown-ups instruct their children. After she'd seated the kitten atop the mammoth, Anasta would stand before them and point at the sky with her finger, direct her gaze upward, and utter the words sky, clouds, and sun. And then she'd kneel down and stroke the grass with her hand and tenderly utter the words, the nice green grass, and the little flower has a scent. The mammoth and the kitten would intently watch what the little girl did, and after a few days, during which she would regularly repeat her lessons, something astonishing happened. When Anasta uttered the words sky and clouds, the baby mammoth, and the kitten too, directed their eyes toward the sky. Upon hearing the word grass, they glanced at the grass. And upon hearing the words, the little flower has a scent, the kitten hopped down to the ground and began sniffing the little flower, the way the little girl had done. Anasta continued her lessons with the animals, even after the mammoth had recovered. The little girl liked telling her 4-legged friends about the meaning of each new word she learned from the grown-ups, and the young mammoth and the kitten liked the attention the little girl gave them. Like well-disciplined pupils, they would come to Anasta's flower bed at noon. The little girl would usually show up at that time too, and she'd give her charges their next lesson. If she didn't show up for some reason, the 4-legged pupils would sit waiting for their friend and teacher for hours at a time, or else head off to look for her. When Anasta turned 6, Dun the mammoth who had also gotten bigger, was pretty much the same as the grown-ups on the outside, but his behavior differed noticeably from the other mammoths. Wood, Anasta's great-grandfather and the head of the family line, was the first to notice that Dun, the mammoth, could understand human speech. It was the following event that preceded his conclusion. Wood was sitting in the shade of a broad tree and weaving a wicker basket for berries. Anasta would often spend time with her great-grandfather. She liked to listen to his stories and be part of all he did, and so she was right alongside him this time, too. His chatty great-granddaughter was quickly and animatedly telling him her thoughts on collecting berries, and she told him he had to make the basket pretty, because then the berries collected in it would be tasty. Right then, Wood noticed that Dun the mammoth, who was standing 10 steps away from them, was looking intently at Anasta and listening to what she was saying, as if he understood the meaning of the words and the sense of the great-granddaughter's speech. He must like the intonation of the little girl's voice and the energy coming from her, Wood thought, noticing that there was almost no water left in the trough where the twigs for weaving the basket were soaking. Wood asked Anasta to fetch a little water from the nearby spring, but his ever-obedient and diligent great-granddaughter didn't rush to fulfill Wood's request. She just turned in the mammoth's direction and quickly told him, "Dun, fetch a little water from the spring." And then, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened, she continued her animated story about the berries in the basket. The mammoth slowly turned around and steadily took one step and then another in the direction of the spring. Then Anasta said one more phrase, "Get a move on, Dun," and the huge mammoth began to run. Wood understood that unlike the other mammoths, Dun wasn't simply carrying out certain commands. Rather, he could understand human speech far better than the other animals. He understood the meaning of the words, and, what's more, he understood the meaning of whole sentences. The mammoth brought a little water in his trunk at the little girl's direction, emptied it into the trough with the twigs. "Thank you," Anasta said, praising the mammoth, and she added, "Don't forget to water our flower garden this evening. But for now, go to the woods and have some lunch. You can see I'm busy." The mammoth answered the little girl with a nod of his head and headed for the woods. What are the limits of the animal kingdom's ability to serve man? Wood thought. To what extent can man direct it? Now people thought up the wheel, and everyone was so delighted by the invention and began looking for different ways to use it. But living creatures, who have already been thought up and are far more advanced than the wheel, we've stopped studying them entirely. Is our race doing the right thing? Where might man's ignorance of the capabilities and life's purpose of the varied nature around him lead? That's what Wood was reflecting on, and these thoughts made his heart uneasy. "Don't surrender, motherland. I'm with you." Seeing Anasta running toward him, Dun joyfully bobbed his head, flapped his ears, and halted. The huge mammoth stretched his trunk out toward the little girl and lightly touched the little girl's shoulder with its tip. She took hold of the tip of the trunk, pressed her cheek to it, and tenderly stroked it. Then she gave the order, "Follow me," and ran hopping off back in the direction of the family space they had left. The mammoth hastily turned around and ran after Anasta. When Anasta grew tired, she gestured to the mammoth to stop and scrambled up his trunk and onto his head. When she had made her way up onto Dun's back, she saw the kitten there too. He had long since grown into an adult cat, but had still retained his nickname of Kitten. He started rubbing against the little girl's leg and purring, expressing his joy and devotion. The three of them made their way to the abandoned family space by late evening. Anasta sent Dun off to pasture, went into her little clay house, and made her way into the darkness to her sleeping spot with the aromatic hay, lay down on it, and immediately fell asleep. Anasta was up with the dawn. She ran out of her little home, and blinking and spreading her arms wide, she ran. She offered her body up to the tender, warm rays. After taking this sun bath, the little girl ran to the stream, and taking a running jump, went with the splash into the little creek with its clear water. The cold spring water burned Anasta's body, but she splashed and laughed in delight. Then, after making her way out of the water, hopping and spinning around on the shore as if she had no idea where to go and how to use the unusual energy that had filled her, she ran up onto a small hill. A cold wind was blowing. The little girl tied her shawl around her waist and threw its free end over her shoulder. She looked silently at the land where her family line had lived so very recently. The family space, where once the sounds of the voices of a great many birds and the chirping and buzzing of insects had unceasingly been heard, was now keeping some kind of fateful silence. Here and there the grass shone white from the chill of the light of the night. The trees and bushes in the gardens weren't blooming. Their little leaves were curled as if in despair, and the family space, shrouded in the oppressive silence with its withering but still living natural diversity, attended to the little girl with incomprehension. And all of a sudden everything all around shuddered when a cry of desperate and confident joy pierced the oppressive silence like a warm ray of light. "Hey, hey!" Anasta shouted in defiance of the oppressive silence. "Don't surrender, Motherland! I am Anasta, Motherland. I am with you." She ran down from the hill and dashed to her flower bed, touching the tree trunks with her hands as she ran and stroking the little leaves of the bushes. "Hey!" she cried out once more, running around the trunk of a big old apple tree with shriveled leaves. The little girl's thin, high, joyful little voice was conquering the silence that had been oppressing the family space. And suddenly another voice joined hers, a powerful low bass. Dun the mammoth was running from the pasture at Anasta's cry, running and trumpeting for all he was worth as he went. And next to the little girl you could also hear a loud, incessant meow, meow. It was the cat with the nickname Kitten meowing in support of Anasta. Anasta stopped at the flower bed that she herself tended, the way all the children in the settlement each tended their own flower beds. The grass on one edge of the flower bed had turned gray, and the flowers had dropped, and only one still unopened bud remained on the little girl's favorite flower. It was drooping toward the ground as if it had thought the better of blooming. But the sight of the drooping bud didn't make the little girl sad. She was looking at it and smiling. She wasn't sad because she was imagining her favorite flower not drooping, but abloom in all its beauty. Squatting down before the flower that had been getting ready to wilt, she quietly and tenderly called out to it, "Hey, little flower, I'm here. Wake up." Then she held her index finger in her mouth, then raised it to determine from which side the cold wind was blowing on the flower. Having determined the direction of the flow of the glacial air, she lay down on her side, on that side of the flower, in an attempt to block the path of the cold air with her own body. Even so, the cold currents still enveloped the flower's small body and stung its little leaves, preventing them from straightening up. Suddenly, the cold streams of air stopped, and Anasta felt the opposite. She felt warmth on her back. She turned. Dun the mammoth had flopped down on his side and shielded Anasta and her entire flower bed from the cold with its own body. "Good for you, Dun, you smart thing," Anasta exclaimed. Latching onto his fur, she scrambled up onto the mammoth's back and, turning to face the wind that was blowing from the direction of the glacier, she joyfully and victoriously shouted out her "Hey!" The cold wind blew even more strongly. Then, after thinking a bit, the little girl turned on the opposite direction and shouted out a summons and waved her arms as if inviting someone invisible to come. The mammoth raised his trunk up high and trumpeted a summons too. Kitten began meowing and calling. The cold wind quieted down, but some time later it started up again. Only now it was blowing from the other side, and it was caressing the flower and the mammoth and the little girl and the cat standing on his back with warm currents. The singing of the few remaining birds greeted the life-giving streams of air. For several days, Anasta fought against the cold wind blowing from the direction of the glacier. Again and again she would run to her flower as soon as the wind started up, and each time the mammoth would lie down next to the flower bed, as had become his habit, blocking the cold's path. Then the day came when the rejuvenated flower bloomed. Running up to the mound of earth, Anasta got down on her knees before the flower and kissed the orangey-red petals, touching them lightly with her lips. Then she took 2 steps to the side and admired the beautiful miracle and the extraordinary, beautiful creation, her flower. Since she couldn't stay standing in one spot due to the exuberant energy that had surged up from somewhere inside her, Anasta at first hopped up and down in place, and then her hops morphed into an unusual, improvised, and rousing dance. Even Dun the mammoth was trying to dance along, shifting from one leg to another. Kitten was spinning round, and now flopping down on his back, now jumping up again, and the living flower was waving its orangey-red petals at them in the warm breeze. And then Anasta stopped. She had caught sight of 2 youths standing on the mountain. The brothers opposite. Both youths of the same height and athletic build. In outward appearance, they looked a great deal like each other, differing only in the color of their hair and eyes. One was light-haired and blue-eyed, and the other black-eyed and dark-haired. The youths stayed where they were for a while, as if giving Anasta the chance to get used to their unexpected appearance. Then, at a leisurely pace, they approached the little girl. "Hello, little girl," Dark-Haired said, addressing her. "You need to act more quickly, little girl. You sensed intuitively that you will be able to stop the glacier, that you have within you powers capable of changing God's program. Now, that's impossible, of course, but you will continue seeking these powers within you, and I will learn more about man than I currently know. I'm prepared to tell you about the world order and answer any questions you might have, little girl. Only you need to act as fast as you can." Anasta had no time to answer. The second youth began to speak. "Hello, Anasta. You're pretty and sharp. You're splendid, just like many other marvelous creations on the great planet Earth. My brother knows much about the world order, but you should, I think, listen to yourself above all others." Anasta finally managed to greet the youths. "A good day, and good, light thoughts to you." "Hold on," Dark-Haired said, interrupting Anasta. "That's just the way it always is. It even makes me sick to hear these idiotic, thoughtless, memorized words. There are 2 of us here. I'm dark, so why do people wish me light thoughts? I'm dark, and my thoughts are dark and hostile. That's the way I am, and that's my life's purpose within God's program." Dark-Haired was growing more and more angry. "If I'm some kind of light little sniveling fool, a light thinker, then I won't be me. Poof! And there won't be anything left of me. You get it, little girl? All that will be left in front of you is one light little simpleton. There are 2 of us. You get it, little girl? And you shouldn't only speak about what's light. Take your thoughts back, if that's what's behind your words, if your words weren't just memorized parrot sounds. If my greeting has offended you, then I will change it and say to you a simple hello," Anasta replied. "Now that's more like it, 'cause otherwise you and your light—" "Who are you?" Anasta inquired. "What family line are you from? I've never seen you before." "Of course you haven't. No one has ever seen us. Our manifestations are present in all human doings, in every moment," the dark youth told her quickly. "Yes, in each and every one. Now, of course, there are more of my manifestations. They are awesome. Almost all of humanity lives from disaster to disaster, dominated by my energies." "Stop, my dark and talented brother," said the light-haired one. "After all, we didn't introduce ourselves." And turning to the little girl, he went on. "Anastasia, try to understand what I say. Between the 2 of us, my brother and I make up the 2 complexes of universal energies. The entire immense space of the amount of energy from each of us, from each of the entities, brought them into inner balance, and some unknown way gave them to the person he had created. Out of everything, he created a person with inner balance. When this happened, we all understood that man must emerge as the strongest entity in the universe. That's why he is not called an entity, but man. But where his strength lies, what his capabilities are, and whether they are limited, that is unknown. And when this strength, will fully manifest, this has, up to the present day, been known to no one in the entire universe, not even to us, despite the fact that we and our separate energies are present everywhere. We are always invisible. We always fill up the space. We're present in the water and in every living wild animal and every worm, and the energies of the universe, each and every one of them, exist within each person. You say you're invisible, Anasta said, astonished, but I can see you. Yes, you can see us because we solidified the air, solidified it so as to exhibit the kind of bodies you're used to. The clouds up there in the sky, for example. They're solidified air vapors, too. You get whimsical shapes when they solidify. Sometimes you get ones that look like wild animals, sometimes ones that look like a human face or body. And in many ways, the human body is made up of water that's been solidified into different degrees. It must be the case that the Creator alone knows the meaning and ratios of the various solidifications of the human body. Our bodies resemble human bodies only on the outside. My dark-haired brother represents all the dark entities, while I represent all the light ones. But why did you exhibit the solidification in the form of a human body? Anasta asked. So you wouldn't be frightened when you heard our voices. So you wouldn't expend the energy of your thoughts on trying to guess where the sound was coming from, Light-haired answered. But what did you want to talk with me for? You set out in defiance of the elements, or to be more precise, in opposition to a planetary disaster. You set out on your own, confident that you'd be able to prevent it. We are certain that this is impossible to do. God's program includes provisions for a disaster. Should mankind follow a ruinous path, that has happened more than once. And we wouldn't have paid any attention to your efforts. It's just that all the universal entities shuddered when the flower on your mound of earth bloomed. It bloomed even though, according to the Creator's program, it should have died, but it bloomed. The flower bloomed thanks to the mammoth who shielded it from the cold breeze. The mammoth is but one link in the chain of events that you constructed. I didn't construct anything. Your thought did the constructing, Anastasia. So does that mean your particles are inside me too? Anasta asked thoughtfully. But I can't feel them at all. A person doesn't feel us, especially when he manages to balance our particles within him. When they are in balance, a third energy appears. And this third is found solely in the universal entity that is man. It appears when we are in complete balance. And this new energy, is all-powerful. It is capable of creating new worlds. No secrets exist for it. This kind of person becomes a master of the universe, a creator, and no one can even imagine his creations. They can be magnificent and unfathomable. Your particles are probably not at all balanced in me, since I can't stop the glacier, Anasta said with a sigh. The flower bloomed, but everything around it in our family space is withering and dying. Anastasia, you are on the path to unity. You can attain it in the next moment, or in 3 millennia. It's for this reason that the universal energies will strive to help you, so that you can learn man's great secret and their own future fate as well. What you said about the extraordinary power hidden in the unity of the opposites is so interesting. But if you know about this extraordinary power, why don't the two of you just agree to unite? The two brothers exchanged glances and cast their gaze over Anasta's family space. Then they began looking in different directions. They were slow to answer, as if at that moment they themselves were looking for the right words to explain it. The little girl waited patiently. Finally, Light-haired answered. What's your life's program? That's impossible. My brother and I have different tasks, Light-haired said. Everybody has his own program, and nonetheless, only in man can we, by each carrying out our personal program, also work on the overall plan and become particles of the new energy that's found only in man. But how in the world can you each work on something different, something opposite, and at the same time contribute to the overall good? Anasta inquired incredulously. We can, by continually outpacing each other just by a little bit. When you start walking, Anastasia, one of your little legs shoots out ahead, leaving the other behind. Then, the one that's lagged behind suddenly shoots out ahead. It's like the legs are competing against each other. And in the end, together, by complying with the body's thoughts, they move it forward. Dark-haired entered the conversation. Now that's some example you gave. You even cracked me up, he said, interrupting his brother. If you're going to imagine us as two little legs, then you're a really short one, and I'm a super long. I take a step, and the body goes right up over mountains, but you just loaf around pretending to move. I'm leading mankind to a planetary disaster for the 5th time now, as part of carrying out my own program. And if the Creator's thought regenerates it all over again, it doesn't matter. Bam! I'll hit it all over again with a planetary disaster, so it won't get out of line. Yes, you're talented, my dear brother. You have really led the life out of the whole planet to the brink of global disaster. But your disasters don't bring you any discoveries, any new knowledge, and they don't add to your powers, but they do always give man new knowledge, and mankind regenerates all over again. You and I, brother, we don't know the Creator's program. Perhaps one day it will happen that mankind will prevent a disaster, an instant before it happens, and that point, an aspiration unknown to you and me, will illuminate its thought. I'm sick of your light little dreamy Kinseys, my light little snotty-nosed brother. You listen to me, little girl, not him, the dark-haired youth said, addressing Anasta. I, little girl, will show you all my power in a form you can understand. My light little one there got a thing or two right. Human thought really is a huge energy, equal to mine in size, and way bigger than his. Each person, if he makes use of this energy properly, really is capable of making the world different. But there's another unseen energy thought, too, collective thought. That's when a great many separate people's thoughts come together to a unified whole. If all mankind's thoughts came together into a unified whole and you got a mankind-wide thought, my brother and I would be like ants compared to it. But I've learned how to prevent collective thought from arising. I'm the one who tosses various philosophical lines of reasoning and concepts out to mankind. And what you end up with is 1 billion people collectively thinking one way and another billion thinking a different way. And that way they repudiate the first group. I, little girl, am the incarnation of all the dark powers of the universe. And if you join forces with me, we will become a force second to none. I have a secret plan. You'll get what it's all about, and you will help me. Together we'll turn all people into our playthings. We'll play with their minds. I'll make you mankind's mistress, and one day you will tell me. I don't like that plan, Anasta replied, and added, I will never take part in it, and I don't think any other people would agree either. You won't take part? You, little girl? Just don't know yet. What an amusing game it is, making people think what you want them to. And don't be so quick to say that people won't follow my program. The wheel has already been invented. It's primitive so far. But then people will put 2 wooden wheels together with a pole, and that's in line with my plan, my ingenious program. But what's so bad about a wheel? When we had to haul food to the injured mammoth dun, a little wheeled cart helped us do that. It's all good, little girl, just great even. This wheel will be perfected, a great many wheels will be made, and people will see that it's difficult to roll a wheel over the natural terrain, across hillocks and potholes, through tall grass, and then they'll cover a huge portion of the earth over with a stone shell so that the wheels will be able to roll along it unobstructed. And growing more and more numerous, they will roll along over the groaning earth, carrying some people atop them and ruthlessly crushing others beneath them. You, little girl, try to find an answer yourself. What can be more powerful than the power which can send people to their ruin? you won't be able to find an answer within you. So go ahead and acknowledge my greatness." Anasta pondered the question, but couldn't find an answer within her. She looked once more at the light-haired youth. In response to the little girl's silent question, Light-haired replied, "Anastasia, my brother has painted a sad picture for you. That's his task, and he's carrying it out in good conscience. I can see the question in your eyes. Do I have a program too?" "I do. And I also want to appeal to you to take part in my program." "So what does your program want?" "To try to comprehend the Creator's great creation, man, to understand the greatness of his future achievements." "But hasn't everything on earth already been created?" Anasta asked, astonished. "The fact of the matter is, Anastasia, you see before you a beautiful blooming flower. Each plant or animal is perfected in and of itself, but at the same time they are all interconnected too. It seems that the Creator has created a miraculous, harmonious, and perfectly earthly world, but that doesn't mean that this world can't be perfected even more. We can view the Creator's beautiful creations as simply the rough material for a more perfected creation, for creating a beautiful and perfected way of life never before seen or imagined by anyone." "But who can be more perfect than perfection itself?" Anasta asked in amazement. "Those who issue forth from it, the great parents, sons, and daughters. For example, you, Anastasia." "Me? But I can't imagine how you could possibly alter what's already been created. I, for example, have no desire whatsoever to alter the little flower that bloomed in my flower bed, even the tiniest bit. I even think that we shouldn't alter it, not under any circumstance, so that we don't spoil its perfection. And why alter kitten? Or how could you perfect, say, Dun the mammoth? By altering his trunk or his ears? By altering it how, and what for?" "But see here, Anastasia, you altered Dun the mammoth." "No, I never altered him," she objected in amazement. "It's true, you didn't alter him on the outside, but your mammoth Dun carries out far more human instructions than all the other mammoths who ever lived on earth, and Dun's understanding of what he's instructed to do is qualitatively different. You'll see that immediately if you compare him with your other mammoths, the ones that look similar. Yes, now I get it. I think he's smarter than all the other ones. It's just that before, I somehow didn't give it any thought." There, you see, not only the external form and build are significant. What's inside and the life's purpose are more important. You were the very one who created and determined what's inside of Dun, and a life's purpose for him, and Dun the mammoth, who on the outside doesn't look at all different from other mammoths created by the great Creator, is different nonetheless. Now, he is a joint creation, the Creator's and yours. We don't know who he belongs to more. After all, it isn't only that Dun the mammoth can carry out a large number of commands that are essential in everyday human life. He's grown more intelligent, loyal, and responsive. Do you recall how one day you fell asleep on the dry grass beneath a tall, tall tree, and when you woke up, you saw Dun the mammoth standing above you, not moving a muscle? You got angry. There was some really unpleasant smell coming from him, as if he'd got smeared with some foul thing and had come on purpose to disturb your sleep with the unpleasant smell. You got up and set out walking toward your home across the wet grass, but before you did, you said to Dun the mammoth in a dissatisfied tone, "Dun, you're forever straggling off from the herd. Now you've started coming here on your own accord, even when no one's calling you. Go on off to your pasture, to your brothers." You went away walking barefoot through the wet grass without looking back even once, Anastasia. Do you remember that the grass was wet? Yes. And do you know why Dun the mammoth smelled so unpleasant? No. When you fell asleep, a thunderstorm began. Not only people, but animals, too, know that lightning most often strikes tall trees. Dun saw you fall asleep, and when the thunderstorm began, he got all agitated and came over to you, leaving his herd. He didn't wake you up. He just stood over you, shielding you from the rain. Some lightning hit the tree you were sleeping under. One branch caught fire and began to fall. It would have fallen on you, but Dun the mammoth managed to cast it aside with his trunk. Then a second branch caught fire, and Dun cast that one off too. But not before the fire had scorched the fur on the mammoth's head, and it began to smolder, giving off an unpleasant smell. The scorched spot was unbearably painful, but Dun stood above you without moving a muscle while you slept. And when you left, after rebuking him for being a pest, he couldn't even bring himself to take offense, and he forgot about the pain. He was overjoyed that you hadn't been harmed, and later, when tending to his burn, he thought of you with tenderness. Anasta jumped to her feet and ran to the mammoth, who was standing a short distance away. He nodded joyfully. Anasta took hold of the tips of his trunk, patted it with her hand, pressed her cheek to it, and then kissed it. The mammoth froze. He kept standing that way, motionlessly, his eyes scrunched up, even after the little girl had walked away from him and gone back to the light-haired youth. "I get it," Anasta said to Light-Haired. "Dun the mammoth has been remodeled. Maybe it happened all on its own, or maybe I helped him in some way. He does differ from the mammoths who were just created by the Creator. Does that mean man's been given that right? The right to remodel?" "Yes, he's been given that," Light-Haired answered. "So now think about this. In accordance with which program? In accordance with the good one. So go ahead and define it. Choose, create. Do you mean that the one who created everything on earth didn't create any one program that man has to live by? I think that he presented man with a great many options to choose from, but that he himself dreamt only of one thing. What? Only man can find an answer to that. But where should we look for it? Inside you, by mentally imagining, analyzing, and comparing various options for arranging life on Earth. Do you mean people live on Earth but know nothing of the Creator's program? People have been given great knowledge about using biological resources for development, but people possess various types of freedom, including the freedom to replace biological resources with technocratic ones. It's up to them to decide whether to use their inner resources deep down inside them, those, say, of a living tree that grows and senses biological rhythms, and by adjusting to them, regulates its own state, depending on the surrounding conditions, or the exterior, superficial resources of a dead tree. When people step into the technocratic path of development, they use the superficial resources. They fashion this or that implement out of wood and use it for fuel or for building material. For some reason, people always choose the technocratic path, but it inevitably leads them to disaster. That's happened more than once. After all planetary disasters are created by people's thoughts that are followed by actions. But the glacier that forced my family line to leave its home, no people created that. Your family line, Anastasia, has already set foot on the technocratic path. And in accordance with the program of life, the glacier will overtake it and bring it to ruin. But life will rise anew. A new hope for the human intelligence will appear. If someone stops the glacier, and only a person can do that, your family line will live in a technocratic world. And sooner or later, the technocratic path will all the same lead to a disaster. True, if a person finds a way to stop the glacier, meaning a way to avert one disaster, then in all likelihood he'll be able to avert it one after it too. A short while before the next one, he'll be able to illuminate people's souls with an understanding of where they went wrong in their choices and avert the disaster. Then mankind will be able to choose a new path and gradually and carefully dismantle his lethal inventions. But illuminating the souls of people of the technocratic world is an uphill battle. During a technocratic period of life, people cease to be intelligent beings. It's necessary to appeal not to their minds, but to their feelings, and through their feelings to inform them about the essence of the divine program. And in order to do this, one has to sense and comprehend it for oneself. But haven't you already comprehended it? Not entirely, really. I think it's impossible to completely grasp in the way that one can completely comprehend my brother's programs. It's impossible to completely comprehend it. Completion is cessation of motion. In addition, I see no limit to how you can perfect, say, your mammoth. What about other wild animals? Others too, as you know full well, Anastasia, that all animal offspring adopt their parents' habits and skills. That means that each new generation will be a bit more perfected than the previous one. And if man correctly determines all wild animals' life purposes, if each subsequent generation continues perfecting the animal world around it, a world that will free man from all everyday concerns, then in the very same way, human thought will be freed up for more important achievements. That probably is what can happen if you're speaking about wild animals, but now I wouldn't ever take it into my head to try to perfect the little flower. It's very, very perfected. I think so too, Anastasia. Even so, your beautiful little flower is but the paint that the Creator has presented to his daughter for her future creations. But why paint? After all, the little flower is a living thing. Yes, certainly, it is a living thing and self-contained, and at the same time it can be no more than a tiny particle of the living picture that is great in its beauty. Take a look at your flower bed. What looks most beautiful in it is your favorite flower. But if you plant 2 or 3 more of the same flower in it, the way the flower bed's look will change. Then you can plant other pretty flowers, ones that don't look like these. And the way the flower bed looks will change once again. Then you can perfect the living picture by arranging the various flowers in a different order. There's no limit to the perfection. It is in accordance with the Creator's program to move toward it. Does that mean that man was created in order to make everything around him lovelier and lovelier? In order to perfect the world the Creator gave him? Is that man's main life's purpose? To create glorious living pictures, to comprehend and perfect the animal world, of course. That is an important life's purpose for man, but I see the main one as something different. As what? As man perfects the divine world order, he himself will necessarily become more and more perfected, and there is no limit to be seen to this phenomenon. Great resources will open up before him. But why will he be more perfected? I mean, no one's going to be instructing man while all this is going on. You, Anastasia, created a lovely flower bed, and your experience helped you understand how to do that. You'll try to make your creations next year even better, and you'll do so using your previous experience and feelings. That means that by creating the first time you gained experience, knowledge, and sensations that enabled you to create something more perfected. And that means that your creation itself is instructing you. Creation, in divine, living nature, perfects the Creator. And there is no end in sight to the heights such great creation can reach. There is eternity. I really want to live in a marvelous world like that, where everything can be perfected eternally, where the Creator will perfect his creations, and the creations will perfect their Creator. I want my papa and mama, my brothers, and grandfather Wood, and our entire family line to live in that world. Anasta smiled, and her eyes shone. I must stop the glacier. How do I do it? How? Human thought is the most powerful energy of the universe. There is no limit to its potential. It's important to learn to use it properly. But how to do this, using what means, that is unknown. Only man has the power to make this great discovery. Most likely, my thought is still quite small and not powerful, Anasta said, sadly sighing. I want the glacier to stop, but it's coming closer and closer, and it's growing colder and colder every day. That means my thought is small. If Dunn the mammoth knew how to think about the glacier, he has a big head, and that means the thought in it might be big and powerful. Anasta ran up to the mammoth and, slapping her palm against the trunk extended to her in greeting, she said, excited, You're so big done, and you have a big head. That means it might contain a big thought. Think your thought done, stop the glacier, because otherwise all you do is listen and listen. At the very least, take a walk over to the pasture, Dun. There's less and less food for you all the time there. Dun the mammoth stroked the little girl's cheek and hair with the tip of his trunk, slowly turned around and began walking off. The cat, nicknamed Kitten, took a running start, sprang onto the mammoth's leg, and latching onto his fur, scrambled up onto his back. Anastasia, it's time for you and your charges to flee this place, the light-haired youth said, addressing the little girl. There's already ice on the other side of that mountain there. That isn't even the main glacier yet, but even it can move the mountain that covers the valley and carry away the gardens and homes where your family line lived. And it's causing the temperatures to fall with every day. The main glacier will press against this ice and the mountain will slowly begin moving. This will happen a few days from now. I will not flee this place. I have to see it, this ice, and understand why it's advancing onto our land. I have to think of a way to stop the glacier. Tomorrow morning I'll go up on that mountain and I'll see it. Bowing to the little girl and taking his leave of her, the light-haired youth said, I wish you auspicious and sharp thoughts, Anastasia. And he addressed his brother, saying, Let us go, brother, and remove ourselves from the little girl's sight. Let's not bother her. Perhaps she'll be able to understand and will learn how to control her thought. Come on, then, let's go. Of the two of us, you're the main hindrance. You got all carried away here, philosophizing and going on and on. Oh, wait, please wait, Anasta suddenly said, starting. Each of you told about his program. That must mean I also have a program, but I've never thought about it. Could it be I don't have one in me? We're getting out of your sight, little girl. You get busy thinking. Don't slack off. You've hardly got any time at all left. Only 2 sunrises, said dark-haired, without answering the question, and the youths left.